So we're going to have to print, we're going to have to continue debasing, and people have to find ways to invest their money so that they don't lose it, so it doesn't melt away like an ice cube. And Bitcoin is the most powerful, not only savings technology, but the best engineered money that we've ever had.
Okay, we're live. Natalie Brunell, you need no introduction. Thanks so much for your time. You're the host of the Coin Stories podcast and the news block coming out. I've already listened to the first episode. It's great. But I wanted to bring you on basically to sort of hear your story. I've heard bits and pieces, and I'd love to kind of hear, about your journalism experience, how you connect the dots, and how you sort of got so savvy with some of the more complex, foundational principles with Bitcoin and the finance sector. So thanks for coming on.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to chatting. My journey started long before Bitcoin, actually. The thing I'm most excited about is the idea of fixing our broken monetary system, and Bitcoin is that solution. But I didn't know what was broken. I did not identify it as our money because our schools don't really teach us how the banking system works, how money printing works, who actually creates money, and why we use it the way that we do today, and why there's inflation. So my journey really started when I was very little, because I immigrated to the country with my family. My parents wanted to come to the U.S. from a formerly communist country, from Poland. They waited decades to be able to immigrate, and they came here for the American dream. They wanted to work hard and provide, a better life for their children. And they just wanted us to get a good education and work hard. So I was instilled with, not only a good work ethic, a strong work ethic, but this idea that the American dream really espouses the idea that you can come from anywhere, come from any background, you could start poor. And if you work hard, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve. And that American dream, I think, has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by the fiat system and the corruption that exists with a controlled monetary system that we have no say over. And so it took me a long time to realize that the thing that I always knew was broken is actually the money. And I saw it manifest in lots of different ways. The first way that really hit my family was the great financial crisis. So my parents worked really hard, took out a mortgage, bought our first home here. And as I went off to college, the bubble popped and my family lost everything. They went bankrupt, and my parents had to really start over now in their 50s. So that was really, really difficult. At the same time, I began a career in journalism, and I started in a very traditional path, started in a very small town, worked my way up to a middle-sized town, to big and to national. And everywhere I reported, I covered a lot of the same issues and frustrations. People feeling like something is wrong. There's a sense of injustice. They can't, even though they're working hard, everything's getting more expensive. The things that actually, matter, like a roof over your head, the cost of education, being able to retire, all those things feel more and more out of reach despite working harder and advancing in people's careers. And no one was able to, again, identify that, hey, it's actually the money that's the problem. And I didn't realize that until I started studying Bitcoin. So was first introduced to Bitcoin in 2017, dismissed it, thought it was like gambling. I thought it was, similar to investing in stocks, and that because it's digital, it could go to zero, it could be hacked. I thought, all of the FUD narratives that are out there, I believed. And then I read the Bitcoin Standard, and that really set me on a path to understanding not just Bitcoin, but what is money and the history of money. And that really changed everything for me. And then I spent, a very long time studying and also learning through my work, which is my podcast. I started a passion project podcast, which was to hear from some of the biggest names that I learned from in Bitcoin, why they believe in this technology. And it turned into my full-time profession to talk about Bitcoin and educate others about Bitcoin. So I'm super grateful to be in the space and contribute.
That's awesome. So what, if I can get, I don't know if you want to go technical with this, but reading the Bitcoin Standard, there's a lot in there. And so what feature or sort of foundational aspect of Bitcoin that really made sense to you initially? Because we all have that. It's like, there's the common questions. What was it that was answered through that specifically that made sense to you?
I think for me, it was just learning that our money is constantly being devalued, and this is not unique to us in the United
Mhm.
States and as the American empire. It has been the cause of the decline of empires in history, and that we really don't have a fair system. There's a reason for all the wealth concentration and the polarization and frustration that people feel, because we are sort of in the midst of that decline, because we have really taken advantage of our position as the global reserve currency, printed so much money, gone so far into debt, and hollowed
Yeah.
out our industrial base, hollowed out the middle class. And here we are. You have an average family who can't afford to buy a house. Kids, young people graduate from college and feel like they can never catch up and own assets, or feel like they can, even get married or have children, afford to have a family. I mean, that's not the American dream. So something's clearly wrong. And it was through reading books like The Bitcoin Standard that caused me to understand that especially when we decoupled from the gold standard and something that was finite and scarce like gold,
Mhm.
we started to go on a path of just totally hollowing out everything that this country was built on. and
Yeah.
and I, we'll never be able to pay off these debts. The unfunded liabilities measure up to about $200 trillion. I mean, we don't really understand how big these numbers are, right? Billions and trillions
Mhm.
feels almost interchangeable today, but we have
Right.
placed the burden on future generations who can never pay this back. And so what are we going to do? We're not going to default and admit that we were wrong. Certainly no politician has the appetite to be able to do that, because they'll never get elected or reelected. So we're going to have to print. We're going to
Right.
have to continue debasing, and people have to find ways to invest their money so that they don't lose so it doesn't melt away like an ice cube. And Bitcoin is the most powerful, not only savings technology, but the best engineered money that we've ever had. So it solves a lot
Mhm.
of these problems.
So I am going to ask you about. So I get, you realize there was a problem early on. Bitcoin's the solution. What bridged that gap? Because I think we all have the after reading and kind of really studying Bitcoin and the protocol and that stuff, it makes sense. But how did it make sense to, like, what was that process like from the technical standpoint of, like, oh, this is digital, but maybe it can't be just copy pasted, or maybe there actually is scarcity. What was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, it just took time. You really have to humble yourself and be willing to admit what you don't know and take the time to learn. And I learned from folks
Mhm.
that were far smarter than me, far more successful, and far
Mhm.
more technical. But I think that for me, it started to click when I really started to also learn about the origins of the internet. I think a lot of us take for granted that the internet was one of the most powerful inventions, certainly in our lifetime, that facilitated the ability for us to communicate and send information globally instantly, right? And it transformed how we do business. It created booming new companies. And yet, not a lot of people know how the internet technically works, right? TCP/IP, the communication system that allows one computer anywhere in the world to talk to another. We take that for granted, right? But yet we embrace all of the use cases for the internet and how it makes our lives easier and more convenient. And I see Bitcoin in the same way, really. I mean, Bitcoin allows us to transfer value globally, instantly, permissionlessly, trustlessly, and so I see it really as the internet of money. And while some people might not ever go down to the depths of how it works technically and how proof of work works and the brilliance of the difficulty adjustment and the cryptographic
Mhm.
breakthrough that Satoshi made, they'll still get a lot of use out of it, because it will not only store their value and the work that they do, and the labor that they work so hard, to create value. They'll be able to store that into the future to take care of their families, but they'll also be able to use it as that medium of exchange and as a permissionless payment system, so that they can send money to anywhere in the world instantly,
Yeah.
with no third parties, no intermediaries, no one telling you can or can't, or looking over your shoulder. So it really empowers us in many ways, and that's what gets me really excited about it. You don't have to have a technical background, you don't have to have an economic or finance background to
Mhm.
really appreciate Bitcoin, and I think it will be as transformative as a technical infrastructure as the internet was.
Hmm. And I think we're slowly getting there with all the ETF talk, and the having narrative is going to be bigger. I think people, in a lot of ways, I think people try to sort of, they want an excuse enough just to, oh, it's, they heard of SBF once and they said, oh, we can just dismiss it so they don't have to do the homework. But I think it's coming that, maybe the tide is shifting a little bit. Not so much they don't have to do the work, is like they just kind of adopt it like we do with a cell phone. Nobody really knows how that stuff works. We just use it every day. So that's so well put. Thanks. I might switch gears just a little bit. How did you, I know you mentioned your journalism background. So how did you go from journalism, to such a financial sector, and talking with the folks you have on your podcast, that you're one of them, talking on that sort of level, guys that have been in the financial space for 40 years. How did you sort of catch up with that, and what did you read, or what did you kind of look into to get there?
Sure. So, in the same way that I believe Bitcoin will democratize access to banking and to finance in general, the internet democratized information and media. So, it gave rise to independent content creators. It sort of oversaturated us, right, with information and channels. So, you have to kind of sift through some of the noise, but it did present a huge opportunity. And so, for me, I had a background in media and journalism. I trained for more than 10 years. I have both bachelor's and master's in journalism. And I pursued that career path, learning how to put together stories, interview. And I was always a very inquisitive, curious person. So I eventually ended up doing a lot of investigative reporting. Also, because I wanted to hold powerful people accountable, because I was very frustrated that, powerful people could get away with things, and the average person who works really hard and plays by the rules and pays their taxes seems to get the short end of the stick sometimes. So it was a combination of a lot of that. And I had this curiosity once I learned about Bitcoin, but I had no outlet for it at my normal news job. So I would pitch stories, and I was able to do one here or there. But I wasn't able to really satisfy that curiosity and that need to learn more and also share it with the public. So I started a podcast. I wanted to learn more about why some of the biggest Bitcoiners developed this conviction for the asset class and what their backgrounds were and what led them down the path to learning about Bitcoin. And so I just did it as a passion project on the side. So many people today have side hustles. I expected nothing from it, especially not, financially. I thought I was going to continue on my journalism path. But it was really rewarding and fulfilling, because when you're an independent creator online, I get to choose the story, right? I get to choose the questions. I get to choose I get to choose what the final product looks like. It's really, you get to be your own boss. And there's a lot of power and freedom that comes with that. And I didn't realize how, it's not that I lacked motivation, because I always loved reporting, but I started to feel like some of the stories that should be covered weren't. Some of the voices that should be heard weren't getting platforms. And I saw a lot of the networks turning to more of a biased style of journalism. And I didn't see that as the type of industry that I entered into when I started in the field. Journalism is supposed to be that watchdog, that extra branch that looks over and makes sure that the government isn't getting away with something. And what I saw increasingly is that a lot of the networks out there, I'm not going to name certain ones, but a lot of the networks, if a government agency reported something, the news agency would take it as fact and not really question it and not hold their feet to the fire. And I saw something wrong with that. And that probably stems from, I had two parents who were very skeptical about media and government growing up under communism. So I was always a little more skeptical. And I think if you study Bitcoin, a lot of those principles and virtues align with the Bitcoin mission, because it is this idea that you no longer have to trust, because the system of trust and these institutions that we put our trust into have let us down time and time again, and debased our money and caused us to live in an environment with so much wealth concentration and not enough opportunity or prosperity for the great majority of people.
Yeah, it's so well put. I was talking to a friend the other day and invited him to like a local Bitcoin meetup. And he was like, I don't know if I want to go. I don't know anything. And it was kind of like, to me, I thought like, well, obviously you don't know who these people are, because to your point, like like Bitcoin represents something that people want, you know, that people want to share, that people are very open and very welcoming. And it kind of represents those ideals that we kind of want to live to. You mentioned in an interview recently, last couple of weeks, that Bitcoin represented dignity, or it stands for dignity. Could you expand on that and kind of show your train of thought there? Because I thought it was really good.
Sure. Yes, I think that Bitcoin helps us restore our economic dignity. So all of us, we have to work. Money is something that is essential for all of us in order to put a roof over our head, in order for us to eat. And again, we take for granted, where does our money come from? Who tells us what is money and what is not? Who controls the supply of the money out there? And we don't
Mm-hmm.
really think about a lot of these issues, and we accept this idea, at least in our country, of 2% inflation. Well, what does that even mean? I mean, if you have inflation, that means that your money is losing purchasing power every single year, and someone decided what rate you would lose that
On
purchasing
purpose.
power at,
Yeah.
right? You didn't vote that 2% inflation. So we don't
Mm-hmm.
call a lot of these things into question. But one thing that I think is, your economic dignity is really tied to your self-worth. If you are working and you feel like your labor is being valued, and you can actually not only take care of you today in the present, but you can put away money for the future, you can take care of the other people around you, you can plan maybe for future generations, that allows us to be at our very best because we're not so stressed, we're not so worried. And when you start to remove those layers of comfort and security, you strip
Mm-hmm.
us down to a sense of survival, basically, right? Like, a lot of people, even though they're working so hard, they are treading water. They can't afford the same, plot of real estate or house that their parents could 2 generations before. Well, why is that? Now you have a 2 income or 3 income household, and they can't afford the same home that someone could on a single income family household, a
Right.
couple decades ago. So I think that we really need to focus on this and address this, because if you don't have economic dignity, I think it causes you to have more fear, have more stress, have more frustration, and start to find outlets to place the blame somewhere, right? I mean, if you feel like a victim, someone must be
Mm-hmm.
causing it. And instead of focusing on the monetary system, the actual institutions, the establishment, and like the root of our economic system, a lot of people point the blame at political figures or, certain groups of people that might be causing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that causes us to sort of come apart as a fabric, as a society,
Yeah.
and connections are so important. I believe humans are at our best when we are serving others, when we are collaborating, when we are coming together, allowing us all to cooperate to create innovations, and
Mm-hmm.
take the risks needed within business in order to create value for other people. There was a really interesting clip from an Austrian economist. I forgot who it was, but he, held up a pencil, and he talked about how many people had to come together for that one pencil to be produced, how many levels of expertise and skills came together for you to just have this simple pencil that you write with. And so
Right.
I think that for us to come together, more people have to feel valued with the work that they're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore they can have value in themselves, and they can value the people around them. And I think it just grows on itself. It's like a domino effect, and it
Yeah.
could be a domino effect in a positive way or a negative way. So for me, economic dignity is it's core to our self-worth and core to our human spirit and our potential.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. All right. So I got one more question. It looks like I sort of had a circuitous path to Bitcoin. We spoke earlier, and I was kind of gambling in 2017 and didn't really understand blockchain or anything. I did my homework after falling on my face a few times with altcoins and NFTs and stuff. So here I am back to Bitcoin. What was your journey like with that? And is Bitcoin the only one, or what is it? What do you see the future looking like with digital assets?
Yeah, so I completely I understand what people are going through when they start that journey, and other tokens look more attractive because they appear cheaper,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it really is, when you zoom out, when you ask yourself, why am I buying this token? It's not necessarily because you believe in the underlying technology. It's probably because it seems like it's more affordable if you can get a lot of units for the
Hmm.
same, money that
Exactly.
you could buy just a fraction
Yeah.
of Bitcoin. And what if it takes off, right? What if it
Right.
just goes to the moon and you sell it right at the right moment and you can
Hmm.
kind of cash out? I mean, it's literally like gambling at the casino or hoping to, win that lottery ticket. And
Sure.
so for me, I realized that I wasn't buying in because I believed in some underlying technology or that I believed that these tokens fixed the problem of money, because they don't, only Bitcoin does.
Hmm.
And so I had to really humble myself and learn and study. And the more that I understood Bitcoin and proof of work, and Satoshi's just ingenious invention, and
Hmm.
how the cryptos are different from Bitcoin, I really began to realize that Bitcoin is the only one I need or want. And I honestly equated a lot to our traditional financial system, in the sense that the average person doesn't really have time to sit down and research every single company that they might invest in as far as stocks, right? I mean, there are hundreds of pages of disclosures and legal documents. And do you know that this company is going to be around in 10,
Right.
20 years, depending on the decisions of, small groups of people and executives? Price to earnings, I mean, they're kind of crazy today because we've had such
Hmm.
a long time of, easy money, easy monetary policy. It turned a lot of these companies into zombies that took on a ton of debt, and they're not actually making any money. So there's
Right.
a lot of risk when it comes to that, and it takes a lot of time. You have to almost like hire, a portfolio manager for all of that.
Sure.
And I think to myself, why is it so hard to just save your money? So you can't leave it in cash, right? It's going to pay 0.01% interest normally
Right.
at a bank. If you invest in equities, you have to take the time to really study. Most people have been putting them into, index funds to get like a 7% return. Well, when we were
Mhm.
lucky during the zero interest rate policy. But what's crazy is if you peel back the layers, not only do only a couple of the companies make up all of the gains in an index like that, but zoom out even further, the inflation rate, the true inflation rate, is about what the S&P 500 has gone up every single year. So you're basically
Right.
just breaking even. You're not actually making money, you're just preserving the value of your money. So again, it's like, why is it so hard just to keep the value, the purchasing power of my money? And Bitcoin, here's Bitcoin, the most perfectly engineered form of hard money, and it has outperformed every asset over the last 10 years. You can never create more than 21 million. It's truly scarce. It's accessible to
Hmm.
everyone in the world and offers property rights as a bearer instrument. I mean, it literally encapsulates all the great properties of good money and then elevates them and makes them instant and permissionless and trustless globally. So that gets me really fired up about Bitcoin, because I don't need anything else. It's like I
Right.
don't have to worry. I don't have to I don't diversify because I don't feel like I
Hmm.
need to anymore.
Right. To your point about getting interest at a bank, I pay attention now. I was looking at a bank statement, and it was like I got cents on my
Yeah.
interest payment,
Yeah.
and then literally the line above that was a charge for $5 of a monthly fee that they just charge of like
Mhm.
a random fee. And so it's just
Yeah.
I don't think it's intentional on the industry's part in many cases, but it's just built like that. They're
Yeah.
basically just it's just a big scam. So
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I think the real estate component is also it's sad in many ways, because again, young people feel like they can never own a home today, and that's such a
Mhm.
central part of achieving the American dream, right?
For
It was
sure.
foundation. Our founders envisioned a world where people owned property, and that was part of the dream of what America was supposed to be. But
Hmm.
today, it's so expensive, right? So most people have their savings account is their home. But is
Right.
that a good thing? Because if they were to sell that home, they are just going to have to overpay for another one, right? I
Right.
mean, as the tide rises, it rises everywhere. So it's not like you can just sell your home and then move into a bigger one that's cheaper. You certainly can't do
Right.
that. And
Yeah.
then you have to pay for maintenance. I mean, people are resorting to trying to become, Airbnb landlords so that they can make some sort of passive income. Again, like everyone's trying to just stay afloat and earn some sort of yield, because our money keeps being devalued and it's worth less and less. And so we have to address that root problem. But until we fundamentally change our system and stop going further and further into debt, thank goodness we have this alternative we can start to accumulate, which is Bitcoin, which is immune to all of those problems with the other asset classes.
And so do you think that the real estate market will be swallowed up by Bitcoin, or a lot of that market cap would move over to Bitcoin and drop? What would that do? How do you see that happening?
So real estate across the world as an asset class is worth hundreds of trillions of dollars. So it's massive compared to Bitcoin, which right now is at 500 billion, right? We were at 1 trillion at one point, but we've come significantly down. Gold is a $10 trillion market cap. So for me to say, do I believe Bitcoin will eat into some of the real estate and certainly the bond asset classes? Absolutely. And they are massive, massive asset classes where wealth is stored right now. I'm not sure if I would go so far as to say that homes will all of a sudden experience deflation, because homes are still more scarce than a lot of other assets, and you need a roof over your head. But I always did find it funny when I was younger that the older a house got, right, it could be dilapidated, especially in certain parts of the country, and it's worth more. It can appreciate by 50% in the span of a couple of years. I mean, that means our money is totally broken. So if we had a little bit less of that, if homes actually were more affordable, and they are becoming more affordable if you price them in Bitcoin, then I think that would be a great world where more people, again, can afford to live in their home as opposed to just living in someone else's property, or having all of these neighborhoods gobbled up by asset managers like BlackRock. It's really fundamental. I think property rights are so important. Families should be able to afford a house in this country and most countries.
Love it. I love your passion, Natalie. I think that'll do it for us, unless you have anything. How can people find you? Plug yourself real quick, and then we'll get out of here.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I have a show called Coin Stories. You can find it on YouTube as well as all of the audio podcasting platforms. So I have an interview that I release every week, and I just started a news segment. So 10 minutes of news headlines so that you can catch up with all the biggest Bitcoin news updates. And I cover the economy as well in that, so you feel like you're up to date with everything you need to know. And in a couple of months, I'm going to be releasing a 101 series, just drilling down the fundamentals and basics of what Bitcoin is for total beginners. So I hope you guys will check that out.